could be directly attributed to waste management, to especially waste burning. So, but there are, there is a, I would say, challenge in attributing air pollution uh, to waste management practices, because a lot of things are common things which come out from other activities, other pollutants that come out from other industrial activities also come out from waste burning. So from in terms of studies that are needed for this, definitely there's a dearth of it, and we need more such studies. It is challenging because studying air pollution, uh, I would say, with rigor in terms of measurement and tracking where it came from, is a challenge. But there are a lot of other aspects which we know are getting contributed from waste, which cannot be ignored. I would just talk about something which is not discussed, but it is a big, often doesn't come into the conversation, but it is becoming a big issue, is the issue of the microplastics. So all tires moving on the ground, they are generating microplastics which are getting into air. There are obviously the issue of black carbon, which is generated when you burn waste, which is largely coming from either some industrial power plants or mainly from burning of waste, which has a huge, the climate change impact. So these two, waste burning and the microplastics which are coming from the ground, certainly are very dominant. So these are things which are coming from how waste is getting managed. Then there is a whole plethora of things which I'm sure Swati can add to, is how do you reduce what is coming into the air because of better circular economy practices. So you, as they say, the climate change impact 50% can be attributed to how we consume and dispose resources. 50% is coming from that. So yes, you see it in the form of that fossil fuel is being used, but what is fossil fuel being used for? What are the activities for which fossil fuel is being used for? And can those activities be addressed by, doing them differently? So a lot is sitting with, that is already proven, that almost 50% and more is coming from how we consume and use resources and dispose them. So big chunk is coming from that, but again, attributing specifically to waste sector, I have also not seen too many studies, and I would, institutions who are represented here, it'll be very useful for us as well to, because to combine these sectors, as you rightly said, there's a lot of funding sitting in air pollution. Uh, some of it could be routed to waste management if this connect is established well.
Swati, do you want to go next?
Thanks, Natasha. Adding on to what Divya mentioned, I mean, of course, waste and air pollution are sort of correlated and not related. I say this because there is also a lot of disaggregation when we talk about populations. So look at the impact of someone living close to a dump site. Perhaps he or she would be able to answer what air pollution is caused due to a site that is on fire, sometimes due to high temperatures, or someone living close to a processing site that's not managed well. The fumes and the emissions, of course, would harm them. I would like to assume that it's not often talked about is because of the fact that our proximity to such sites, I'm just trying to address the social angle here. Most of us are not living close to a dump site. Most of us are not living next to a processing center, or for that matter, an incineration plant. But imagine for someone for whom it's a day-to-day task or challenge. Talk to residents of, say, someone living close to the Okhla incineration plant or to such sites. So clearly for them it's a matter of concern, because it directly or indirectly affects their health in the short period as well as in the longer period. Or for the wider informalities that exist in our cities, and I'm talking about millions of workers who are exposed to such sites on a day-to-day basis. They basically live there, they are in there. For them, it's a grave concern because A, they're dealing with hazardous material, but B, they're also breathing hazardous fumes and gases, right from nitrous oxide, to various particulate matter, carcinogenic hydrocarbons. So clearly, I would like to say that it's not often talked about because it's also not a great leveler. Waste management and air pollution, the populations that sort of on a daily basis have their ill effects, it's variable. It's not everyone who's facing the issues and challenges, and even if it's just 10% of the cost, like for air pollution, of course waste management is not beyond 10%, but it is a significant fraction for someone who's living close to such a site, who's sort of dealing with hazardous gases on a day-to-day basis. And as Divya rightly mentioned, the dearth and lack of research on this area again is a major concern. I'm no expert on air pollution, so of course I'll refrain from going in depth on it, because of course we have speakers who'd be speaking about it. But clearly, if we look into the Clean Air Action Plans, or just correct me on this, if we talk about the national inventories of air pollution, they do not take factors, for instance, such as open air burnings into account, or they do not take factors such as how many dump sites are on fire into account, which I feel are very significant. So one major concern is that we have disaggregated populations who are facing this. And maybe that's why, and perhaps for this chunk, there's no one to speak for. And then secondly, the lack of research and data in this area. Even if I were to Google, I wouldn't find anything significant in this area apart from some random global numbers, which really lack a country-specific context. So really about time that there is work and research in this areas required, which correlates to what you mentioned, that there isn't enough funding available because perhaps no one takes it as a huge concern over other areas around air pollution. I'll stop here. Yeah, thanks.
So actually, the next two speakers, Tanushree and Dr. Vinayak, the fact is that there isn't even enough correlation between direct impact of various other sectors and air pollution on health. So solid waste management is far away. And on the other hand, for sure, it's funny that you say that, because when we were prepping for this webinar, we all got together and sort of tried to look for material, and there's very little actually. There's very little material, but the material we did find was startling and scary. So Tanushree and then Dr. Vinayak, if you'd like to come in here.
So I'll not comment on the numbers because I know Dr. Sinha has done a national level inventory, and he should be the person who should tell us about, how we are not able to adequately account for impact of waste on air pollution. So while I partially agree with the fact that we don't have numbers, I also disagree. There are some numbers which do give us the sense of extent to which waste is a problem as far as urban India and rural India are concerned. So I will not talk about the numbers. I will talk about a different entry point, because the question that you've presented to us, Natasha, is that how do we as a network work on waste as a sector? So first and foremost, if we look at the Swachh Vayu Sarvekshan, which is the annual clean air survey, and the evaluation process that occurs to rate cities, 20% of weightage is actually given to interventions which are aimed at addressing emissions from waste. So there is a clear sort of connection that the survey format itself is established between waste and air pollution. Like, air pollution is not something that we can deal with in isolation. It's an outcome of multiple activities, and the MOFCC format under Swachh Vayu Sarvekshan has already accounted for this intervention. That's point number one. Point number two, very important again, the National Clean Air Program constantly talks about convergence across different urban schemes. And again, if we look at some of the urban schemes like, Swachh Bharat Mission, or if we look at the scheme called Satat, which is focused on utilizing biomass for energy, or if we look at the Gobardhan scheme, all of these schemes, they can be sort of converged towards meeting NCAP goals. Again, sort of a clear alignment between what the National Clean Air Program is trying to do and what these other urban missions are trying to do, given the fact that the government is talking increasingly about convergence. Third and final point, and this kind of speaks to the point that Swati was making, that we are not really accounting for open fires in our emission estimates. As some of you may already know, what we've been doing at CEW is we've been going around the city, some of the cities that we're working in, and digitizing different kinds of dispersed pollution sources. And one of the most commonly visible dispersed pollution sources is simply dumping of waste. I think, again, this is a very good entry point for citizens, scientists, communities, because unless and until you can visualize a source, you're not likely to act on it. So I, again, feel that mapping of dispersed pollution sources like waste dumps through grievance redressal apps, which have been created for air pollution, is again a very good entry point for the network to work on. So 3 points from my side. One, leverage the existing Swachh Vayu Sarvekshan framework because the connection is clearly established. Second, how can we work towards convergence? So there are different groups which are working on different sectors, but at the end of the day, the NCAP does talk about broader convergence across different schemes. So how can we as different groups work towards that convergence? And third is, how do we make these blind spots a little more visible through effective use of grievance redressal apps, which have specifically been created for air pollution related complaints? So I'll stop my submission there.
So I'll come back to you to, maybe we'll go a little bit deeper into the 20% that you mentioned, where, if that is the goal, then what does impact look like if we were to sort of do concerted effort? But Dr. Sinha, if you can come in on the data and
Yeah, sure. I hope you can all hear me. So
yes.
Let's go with the 5 points. I think you nicely put these 5 points to lead the discussion. So the first thing that I'd like to emphasize here is that a lot of this sort of narrative of only 10% at most is contributed by waste burning is based on bulk monitoring data of PM2.5, which is just a mass concentration. So, we have an air quality standard for that. It's easier to monitor that rather than the other toxic stuff that comes from waste burning emissions. So at the outset, first, I'd like to emphasize this point that we should correct our way of thinking. If we really want to solve the air pollution crisis problem, as one of the previous speakers was mentioning, people living near these dumps, people who are exposed to the fumes that come out from open burning of different kinds, then the first thing we have to understand is it doesn't matter whether it's waste, whether it's crop residue, whether it's cow dung. All of this, chemically speaking, at the end of the day, in very layman's terms, layperson's terms, is carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, sulfur, and oxygen. Okay. So when you burn this, what happens is that whatever the molecules that are present in this particular matter, the bonds break in the flame, and then they release a very dangerous cocktail of a large number of reduced hydrocarbons and PM2.5 and black carbon, which is a subset of PM2.5. So that's the first thing that we have to sort of educate ourselves about, that the open burning, by virtue of being a very inefficient form of combustion. So when we talk about coal that's being used in the power plants, or, the fuel, petrol or diesel we burn in our four-wheeler vehicles, these are well regulated or better regulated because there's a scrubber at the end of the stack that sort of removes the most dangerous stuff. But all these other types of activities that occur in and around our cities, and waste burning is one of them, these are unregulated, these are opportunistic, and the sheer quanta of that is something that there are now studies which show that this could be a very significant source. So now coming to the research side, since I guess first, not to misappropriate the credit. So the actual emission inventory work, there are two kinds of works that on this topic that have come out of ISEN Mohali in the last 10 years. The first type is where you basically look at the amount of waste that ends up in the landfills, and then what fraction of that ends up being burnt. And for that, as was mentioned by Tanushri, Dr. Babels and his group has compiled emission inventories, and the results there are the following. So the first thing I'd like to emphasize is, even if it's 10%, okay, first of all, it's not 10%. I'll come to that number later. It's more like for Delhi and large cities, it can be as much as 27%. And how do we do that? I'll show you. I try to explain non-specialized terms, non-technical jargon. But even if we just look at the bottom-up compilation of, okay, there's this much kilogram of waste that's burnt. The waste comprises of these different types of material, okay? And how much of each pollutant. So we're talking about this study was fairly comprehensive because of the kind of instruments we could use to measure different gases and particles in the smoke. We're talking about more than 100 organic compounds, plus PM 2.5, your standard stuff as well, black carbon and greenhouse gases. So when you break that down, then it turns out that the really toxic stuff, the component of the really toxic stuff is way higher from this type of source than from other sources. So even when you talk about this 10%, this number is coming from, okay, there's 100 microgram per meter cube of PM 2.5, let's say in the ambient air, then about 10 microgram per meter cube of that, just for one pollutant, PM 2.5, is coming from this. But you have not really considered that there are these 100 other pollutants in the gas and aerosol, which also come from the same source. Okay, that's one part. But even in this 10% could act for PM 2.5 itself, could be responsible for more than 50% of the toxicity of the PM 2.5. I mean, this is something that I hope that the organizations that are working with the various stakeholders, the citizens, would be able to impress upon policymakers and the citizens, which is that we have to move, if we want to solve the air pollution crisis problem, we have to counter the details. There is no shirking around that. We have right now a very good sense of what are the hotspots based on the screening measurements of PM 2.5 and PM 10. So we know that. But then now the real deal is, what is this made up of? And how much of that is really toxic from a health? And that's where now I can come to the part. We have actually looked at the kind of toxicity that is there in paddy residue burning smoke, wheat residue burning smoke. These are all forms of agricultural waste burning that occur episodically, post-harvest seasons. And then we have also looked at municipal waste that ends up in the landfill. Like if you drive into Delhi, you have this huge mountain. In Bombay, you have the huge mountain. In Chandigarh, you name any big city, and what typically happens is our incinerators are not really functional, or they're not able to handle the quanta of waste generated, and it just ends up on a landfill. And then near Diwali time, if it's not raining, then they clear the landfill by using the atmosphere as a dump. So you just set it on fire, and then you clear out the material and add a new stuff. So there, benzene, for example, is actually one toxic hydrocarbon where our own CPCB has a ambient air quality standard, just like for PM 2.5, and it's only 5 microgram per meter cube. We see that the amount of benzene from waste burning far exceeds that which you'd get from like more conventional. Like if you take the traffic source, then because of the fact that, it's burnt more efficiently, the carbon goes mainly to carbon dioxide, then there are scrubbers. It's much less on a per capita basis. So what I'll do is I'll share I don't want to bombard with too much, but 3 things in the chat box, 3 articles. if you just read the abstract, the first two tell about what is also the projection, like 2030, 2050, given the government policies, what will be the largest source of toxic emissions. And then the other is what I was referring to as in ambient air. Somebody mentioned quite rightly that until recently, somebody mentioned an IIT Chennai study, but even that study did not really, well, if you compare it with global standards of state-of-the-art pace. So the way to normally apportion all these multitude of sources, as you said, similar compounds, similar pollutants are emitted from all these different sources. So how then do you distinguish between each of them and then quantify the contribution of them? So for that, you have to use a lot of what we call chemical firepower. So you basically fingerprint each source in terms of 100 different organic molecules. Okay, so these are just basically different substances that come out from that, and the ratio of in which the substances come from a particular source then acts as a kind of fingerprint of that particular source, and then you put it into a source receptor model like a PM 2.5. So really the key here is to be able to measure along with the PM 2.5 and PM 10 and the other criteria pollutants, all these other chemical marker compounds that enable you to distinguish and quantify the individual source. So there I'm just sharing, I'll share the paper, it has just come out. We find actually 25% in terms of direct emissions can be present just from waste burning, not 10%. But there is another aspect, and I'll mention that and then I'll stop here, which is that we should also not think about air pollution as only in terms of what is directly emitted from a source. You see, there are many sources which emit molecules that act as precursors of far more toxic secondary pollutants. So for example, when you talk about surface ozone, for which we also have a growing problem now in the summer in India, that is emitted because that is formed in the air photochemically. It's not emitted directly at all at the surface. It's different from stratospheric ozone. And this is formed in the air from hydrocarbon precursors and nitrogen dioxide. Okay, with some through chemical. So if you look at the secondary pollutant formation potential, I have mentioned the toxicity aspect, but if you look at the secondary pollutant formation potential, which we also calculated in our research study recently, then this is about 22%, higher than 22%. It's among the highest contributing ones to the secondary pollutant formation in terms of secondary organic aerosol and surface ozone. So we have to think of a source in terms of what toxic stuff does it emit, whatever is known, okay? And of course, you can't measure everything, that's fine. But that doesn't mean we should sweep that under the carpet. Second, what does it, what can it make in air when the emissions from that source get cooked in the air? How much is that secondary pollutant formation? So these are some challenges that we face. I'll stop here.
So, I mean, yeah, the 10% was just to sort of take a jibe on the whole thing, because we've just been, I mean, this entire sort of discussion, we really came to a point where we weren't, I mean, Asar is, we're not experts, right? So we were asked this question time and again, especially by external audiences like the funders, where they were like, you know, but what will that amount to and what will impact look like? So actually from there, if and so if I were to sum up what everybody has said, there's clear reason to tackle solid waste management as an issue or a sector if one is even you know, focused on air pollution. That's been decided. It's way above 10% in most cases. The health impacts are tremendous, even if it's not well documented in terms of direct correlation. So actually the crux of the matter, and we're already at 6:35, but so if we, and Tanushree, I'll probably direct this to you so that you can give us a sense of what that 20% sort of looks like from the Vayu scheme, as well as so if we were to look at you know, concerted effort from all of us who are present here and others, of course, from the extended network, to work on solid waste management from the lens of air quality, what would impact ideally look like? That's a really weighted question, but yeah.
Give me 2 minutes. I'm just pulling up the survey form to kind of run you through the indicators. So give me
All
2
right.
minutes. Just handle crowd meanwhile.
Yeah. All right. Swati, do you have any thoughts? I know you're not an air pollution expert, but if you can maybe address it from the point of view of at least open burning, because that's clearly one of the key sources of.
Yeah. I think from a very in a layman perspective, the reason why open burning and littering and of course that leading to open burning happens because there isn't enough on ground segregation that's happening on the ground, and the dearth of end-to-end systems supporting segregation leads to a lot of mismanaged waste, which eventually goes to dump sites or which is being burnt in the open. And why is it being burned? Because perhaps it has low recyclability, or perhaps it is contaminated, which is not feasible for the informal actors to clean it, wash it, and then send it for recycling. So there are multiple factors, but of course it has a direct correlation with lack of robust end-to-end systems that support segregation. What we also need is more effective local bylaws or policies on the ground that incentivize and disincentivize littering and burning. So of course we have very few examples of local bylaws or policies that have been very effective in reducing waste burning. For instance, for Delhi, we have solid waste bylaws that in itself are quite robust for the fact that they focus on decentralized waste management. They have fines and littering as a mechanism. They do talk of decentralization of powers to ensure that different actors can monitor and have effective compliance mechanisms in place. But then again, the entire implementation of the bylaws is not there, which is a major concern. So I think it's a double-edged sword. One, of course, is action on the ground, and then secondly is effective policies or effective local policies, at least from a waste management point of view. The third thing which I feel is missing is that the choice of various stakeholders to work in silos. We need more multi-stakeholder platforms, forums, or different stakeholders to come together and work together in this space to ensure wider action, both in terms of policy as well as in terms of implementation. I think if Tanushi is ready, I'll hand it over to her for more relevant details on the air policy front or the numbers. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Swati. Yes, so actually interesting bits here. I'm looking at the Swachh Vayu Sarvekshan evaluation framework, so to say. So there are 6 components if you're looking at measures to abate emissions from biomass burning. So the first one is, and there are about 10 points attributed to this particular component, which is percentage of solid waste collected against generated. Now, where this gets interesting is because if we look at some of the estimates by Central Pollution Control Board, what they say is that on a daily basis, 1.6 lakh tons of municipal solid waste is getting generated. But out of this, 31.7% is unaccounted for. So we don't really have credible numbers on collection and treatment, but we still have a component within the evaluation framework which speaks to scoring this. So this is clearly a gap which needs to be addressed. Some of the easier ones, which I think, and these are also low scoring in the framework, are number 1, installed capacity to process generated waste. I would assume this would speak to the incineration facilities, the C&D waste recycling facilities. So there are about 5 points for installed capacity to process generated waste. One entry point again for us as a network is definitely to see how well the ban is being imposed. So how they are measuring the success of imposition of the ban is on the basis of number of complaints. So if there are no complaints, then the city gets all the 5 points under this component. If there are a certain number of complaints around burning incidents, then the score goes down. So there are 6 basically components under measures to abate solid waste burning. I do see that the 5 points around imposition of the ban are something where we can certainly intervene. I also feel that this mismatch between, looking at collection versus treatment is something that we could potentially intervene again from the citizen science perspective, because I think that no matter how rigorous scientific assessments, whether these are emission inventories, whether these are bottom-up approaches, we will not be able to account for some portion of the waste. And this is where I feel citizen science could actually play a critical role. So those 2 would certainly be my entry points, looking at where I see the data gaps are coming from, and the Swachh Vayu Sarvekshan evaluation framework. I'm actually going to dump the evaluation framework in the chat box for people to peruse, because of course, I mean, we are talking about waste, but this covers other sectors as well. So we can actually try and see how the government is really thinking about interconnection between different sectors and air quality outcomes.
Thanks so much, Tanushree and Swati. So actually, the point of, the convergence point is obviously extremely important, because even when we, all of us in our own capacities have worked with ULBs, and we found that there's absolute, there's no word to describe how badly they're non-convergent in most cases. And what we have sort of, I think as far as waste burning is concerned, again, in terms of correlation between, waste burnt and emission increase, and, hence working on that to reduce pollution is sort of direct. I actually wanted to quickly get everyone's sense of, so there are a lot of our networks, especially in the smaller cities like Durgapur and Howrah, who are working on putting in place decentralized waste management practices in small, housing complexes and RWAs and things like that. But again, I'm really sorry, but I'm doing this again and again. But when we spoke about this to one of the funders, especially, they were like, "But hey, how is that going to sort of be helpful or impactful on air quality?" So, are there any sort of thoughts, or at least some sort of an idea of how to tackle that space as well? Because of course, biomass burning and waste burning are sort of easier to sort of make that argument against, but in terms of just and we realize that if you're saying that basically if you were to reduce the kind of waste that's going to these landfills or getting burned, that itself is a reduction in emission. But how do you make that more plausible for our external audiences? Tanushree, you have your hand up.
No, I had a quick comment to this funder question. So I think
Yeah.
what this is boiling down to is what is the monitoring evaluation protocol that the funder has in place. Now, if your funder is not really married to air quality improvement as an outcome, I still think that if it could be pitched in the manner of, increase in marks on the Swachh Vayu Sarvekshan against the waste component, because this is publicly available data. We get to see how cities are performing, across each of the components within Swachh Vayu Sarvekshan. So if there is a year-on-year improvement in performance within the ranking framework, it's a clear way to say that, hey, the city is working towards waste management. This will have implications on air pollution. Even the financing agency sort of understands that. So I really think that if the funder is not extremely married to air quality outcomes, this would be a good way to position it.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. Divya, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so decentralization, there are two very clear points. Again, this can be computed very easily because decentralization, one big advantage is the reduction in transportation. So the moment you start managing waste on site, so not only you reduce what is going there, you can reduce the frequency of transferring waste. So if wet waste is transported, it needs collection and transportation on daily basis. But if wet is getting composted or going to a biogas plant locally, then dry waste can go for whatever are your centralized processing facilities, be it an MRF or any other recycling facility. You can send it once in a week or 15 days or a month even. So transportation impact I'm sure can be computed easily. Most of these are compactors, very badly maintained diesel-based vehicles. So that impact can be calculated easily and will be available. The second aspect of decentralized waste management is, as Dr. Vinayak said, landfill fires, some are intentional for sure, but some are unintentional because of the methane that gets trapped in because of the wet waste. Methane will not get generated if you are only sending dry waste to the landfill. So the moment you pull out that fraction, immediately methane, GHG impact is aside, just the air pollution, if you are talking about the burning aspect, those fires could also get reduced because methane is not getting formed in the landfill. So decentralized, I would say certainly some more parameters could be more easily calculated. But if we have time, I would like to hear two things from Dr. Vinayak, that the studies that have been done, have they been just done around the landfills or they are more spread out in the cities? And second, a lot of this open burning conversation quickly shifts to supporting incineration. There also we know that yes, some common pollutants may come down, but some very dangerous pollutants go up in number, some things like dioxins and furans. So have you also done studies around the incinerator? If you have time. Otherwise, I'll connect with Dr. Vinayak separately to get
If
insights on these.
If Dr. Vina, if you can address it quickly, then I actually just wanted to sorry about the pressure.
Yeah,
but
maybe I just give
yeah.
some very quick.
Sure.
But first of all, you made very excellent points about why decentralization is a key part of the solution. So when you talk about dioxins and furans, these are more in the persistent organic pollutant category. So we have to talk about the poison, the fast-acting one, immediate one, and the longer one. So I guess it's a trade-off there, and one can discuss which one is better or not. And in terms of the surveys, or like how was these studies done? Was it near the RAN fair or so? So actually, this was based on surveys that Dr. Babel and her group of students did in around rural and urban areas. But it was mainly centered in North India. So we haven't really done it in South India. And then it was also based on looking at the changing landscape in terms of policy. So one point that you mentioned about, what came out from those surveys, I'm just mentioning that because it's relevant. It's that you need to get a buy-in from the citizens into this, and financial incentives directly, I don't know. So that's question more for you as a circular economy.
Not much financial incentives, Professor Sinha. So we are also looking for all these points which are related to health, and so
but
air pollution is a big, big
absolutely
thing for us.
But,
Yes.
Yeah, but one thing that worked, because Dr. Babel also tried some mitigation measures, like what things would be attractive of work, and if you can find a way to decrease the electricity bill of many households by, as you said, nowadays you have this household
Biogas.
wet waste, biogas. There are challenges in getting it, but I think the technology is improving. So I think it's worth spending on those kind of initiatives. I'll stop there, and we can connect later. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you.
Thank you, Divya and Dr. Sinha. So just, actually just to make sure that if we do go over time just a little bit, if that's okay with everybody. But I think at least from from our side, there was just one additional thing that we'd like to pick some brains on is, so some of us have been working with urban local bodies, and there's not, I mean, of course there's no resistance in terms of working on the issue of solid waste management. They're more than they actually, most of the departments we work with have been very, very open to taking support and things like that. But if we were to let's say prioritize in some manner, if we were tackling the issue of solid waste management, is there a sense of what should be that first thing that we definitely should tackle? From Tanushrী's take, there are a few things. Of course, the grievance portal is something that each city should definitely have. We should obviously, encourage citizens to actually put those grievances, and use the grievance portal. That's one huge takeaway. I mean, I can of course sum up things, but if one of you would like to come in on what should be those top 3 points that we should definitely go to the municipalities with. Anyone, actually, if you're willing to take this point.
Natasha, just to clarify, do you mean to say the top 3 things that a municipality should have, or one should approach a municipality with, like?
One should approach a municipality with. Because, I mean, as far as the Clean Air Action Plans are concerned, that they are following, those already have those points. Some are effective, some aren't. So from our point of view as an ecosystem who's working on air pollution from this lens, what should be our sort of, when we go to them, if we can sort of influence their prioritization, then what should that look like?
Okay. I'll just add one, and perhaps, we all are here to perhaps add on to that point. One, of course, I feel on the ground, especially with municipality, is dearth of data itself. They really don't have numbers in place to even estimate anything or benchmark anything. So no baselines, right? When we talk about municipal data, it's very bare minimum data related to how many trucks are towed to the dump site and then how much quantum it is, but no estimation of leakages, no estimation of what is mismanaged, and also no characterization of what is mismanaged or what are the elements that are polluting in nature. So I feel number one is evidence-based data on municipal solid waste. There are many tools, various ways of doing these surveys or inventorization studies. But one thing is clear, that you can't have systemic changes without having robust data in place, and guess estimates will not work, and old estimates will not work. So for me, the major issue and how we should approach municipalities, or if we can work together with municipalities to generate that data. Having done this work, I feel this is really important. This helps them to plan better. This also helps to integrate various actors in the space better. So that's like the prime one for me.
Actually, Swati, just would you mind, I mean, since you said that you've already done that, would you mind sort of elaborating on that a little bit, just to tell us what that looked like?
So previously, when I was with UN Habitat, we did as a pilot that was being implemented in 3 countries. We piloted this study in India in 2 cities, one being Mangaluru and one being Trivandrum, where we did detailed assessments of municipal data. And this means live characterization for a period of about 14 days on, the various components of waste being generated at household level, commercial level, what is going to the landfill site, dump site, or if, for instance, Trivandrum calls itself as a zero landfill city, then what is going through various formal channels and informal channels, what are these numbers, interviewing various stakeholders, but also doing a detailed on-ground characterization, and then mapping this, which means not just, doing those Sankey diagrams, but also spatial analysis. And that revealed a variety of parameters which perhaps the corporations didn't have, especially on what is leaking and leaking where. Is it going to the drain? Is it going to the coastal side? Is it being burnt? Is the leakage on the land? So I feel these estimations are very imperative, and corporations don't have access to this kind of data. So it's really important to have evidence-based analysis, and if as organizations we could support them or work together with corporations on this. I could share the fact sheets. They are freely available, so I could just put the link for your access. And also the tool. As I said, it's not just a one-size-fits-all tool. There are multiple tools that are available, but I could just share this tool that we had utilized for this analysis. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks so much. Tanushree and Dr. Sinha, do you want to go next?
I think I already made points. So
On working with municipality, Dr. Sinha, any thoughts on that?
I probably what I have to say may not be that encouraging for you to listen.
No, we are okay. We're
So
not
but, yeah, I think Tanushree is there. So let her go first. At this time, I can share a few
All right.
anecdotes.
All right, thank you.
No, I think I go back to the first 3 points that I made. I think as a community, as an ecosystem, we need to keep our eyes out for the Swachh Vayu Sarvekshan rankings. A lot of it is happening based on self-reporting. If there is an avenue for us to try and unearth inconsistencies between the evaluation that is happening on the basis of reporting and what is the ground reality based on what is being collected through grievance redressal apps, I think that would be a very fantastic way of looking at data transparency, but also sort of egging municipalities to be a little more accountable in terms of their activities to address air pollution. So if we can hit that sweet spot of incongruence between what's being reported and what's being observed on ground, I think we have ourselves a very interesting, exciting product, which looks at cleaner action, which looks at what's happening at cities, which also looks at accountability from urban local bodies. So that would be my recommendation. But also just Natasha, going back to your point of how do you pitch this to a ULB, I think it'll be good to pitch this to a ULB because you can also tell the ULB that if you're doing better accounting of citizens, of complaints from citizens, or how well your waste is being generated, you can actually show how your improvement is, how your sort of waste management is improving year on year, and how this can translate into increased points under Swachh Vayu Sarvekshan rankings, which would mean additional financial incentives for the city. So it's a bit roundabout, but of course it can be pitched that way.
Yeah, got it. Divya, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so I would say that building on what Dr. Vinayak and team has done. See, we also, when we approach the municipality, forget municipality, even people. See, municipality is also trying to solve their problem from addressing source segregation to begin with. They're struggling with it. Earlier, our pitch to people was that if you don't segregate waste, if you litter, it will be dirtier place. But now that the primary collection has improved significantly in the country, even whether you segregate, you don't segregate, you dump, it will get picked up. So that pitch which we had related to better behavior, related to immediate health, has gone because collection has improved. So hence air pollution and that connect is very important. If we can come up with some very relatable numbers, like when we talk about GHG to common people, how do we talk about? We say if you recycle so much of your waste, it is like removing 3 cars off the road. Okay, so if you can say that if you do this practice, if you do this, and which results in this much of waste, less waste being burnt, this translates into this much of reduction in lung cancer, or some relatable, because as Dr. Vinayak said, these conversations are very technical. How many people will really relate to that, secondary ozone being formed, benzene being there, dioxins being there, unless you actually show the impact on earth, on people's health. So that if if Asar and this network can come up with some very relatable stats coming from actual research, it'll be of lot of value to municipalities to further strengthen their communication to the communities, and even for organizations like ours, which is heavily on ground in helping municipalities to get around this problem. So I feel that will be of lot of value.
Go ahead, Dr. Sinha.
Yeah, you mean me? Okay.
I saw you unmute, so I
Yeah,
took
yeah.
that as a chance.
Okay. Yeah, no, so I thought maybe I do have a positive story to share here. So working with Punjab Pollution Control Board, one thing we have to do is we have to empathize with their constraints. Usually their priorities are different. It's a very hierarchical, municipalities generally are very hierarchical organizations, not like academic institutions or like we can say whatever we feel like, but they have to sort of, they have a particular system. So this just to tell you that initially when we looked at the kind of waste that was being burnt in and around cities, one source that really caught our attention, because when we compared the different ones, so if you take leaf litter burning, right, and you take let's say plastic burning and other types of waste. So leaf litter burning, it turned out, was really very, very bad. So in terms of engaging with municipalities, if you can tell them to prioritize, if you say, get rid of all the solid waste, and that's probably too ambitious to start with, but we found got a lot of traction when we showed them the numbers. Like if you burn 1 kilogram of leaf litter, so the first reaction was, there is no leaf litter burning. It's a banned thing. It doesn't happen in and around. And then I said, see, if you want a solution, we have to be honest about it. I am not saying like before the NGT that this is what this municipality is doing. I'm just telling you, given a chance, you do. And sure enough, in the last 2-3 years, and this was thanks to the efforts. So you need political leadership, will from the leaders of the organization as well, to back up the people, so that right through the ranks, who have to, the people in the municipality have to carry it out door to door. They know that, yes, it's something that the bosses also are very keen to get accomplished, and I'll have to answer for that. So because they have to manage many things, I empathize with them. There's no blame on that. So what we realized last 2-3 years, actually we see leaf litter burning has really gone down in a very big manner. People are actually collecting it, segregating it as one category. And in terms of emissions, so the way I like to explain it is, in your class, if you have 10 students and 2 of them are very boisterous, make a lot of noise, right? You want to bring down the noise pollution in the class. Then instead of trying to go after all 10 who create some noise, you have to give them the data, evidence-based guidance, and say, okay, maybe to start with, let's go after the top one, which is also practical for you to manage. So this could be one strategy, and I'd be happy to share and it's there in the paper, but I understand if many of you don't have the time and you get sunk in the detail, but we can break it down for you. And I'll just end by saying that in terms of residential biofuel usage, for example, people use different types. We found that cow dung is really the most worrisome one in terms of toxic emissions. And so we could show what it emits, how much of it. And so if you had to replace among the various alternatives that are available, that would be another thing where you can prioritize and win a lot. Like the stats were that about, I don't have the numbers in my head exactly, but it was something like this, that although only less than 20% of households, it has been improving all the while thanks to policies of households use cow dung as a fuel. Still, if you look at the PM 2.5, from all the residential biofuel source categories, cow dung alone makes up for more than 50% of it. So, so if you have that kind of a stat staring in your face, then it really is, you can gain a lot by just focusing on that. So wins like that. Stop there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sinha. Does So I mean, yeah, I have lots of questions, but I can't ask any of them. But does anyone from the audience have any burning questions you'd like to ask? I probably just have one or two we can maybe squeeze in, but Bhagwan, yes.
Thanks, Natasha. It's it was quite insightful to listen to you all, and really thankful for that. But whenever I goes to the all political leaders, they ask कि नहीं बोलो क्या low hanging fruit है, क्या करना है हमें, वो बोल दीजिए. So most of this time I am being asked कि नहीं आप top 1, 2, 3, 4 ये चीजें बोलो कि क्या करना है waste management के लिए. So that something comes in. So I'm still feeling like of course this was quite directional the conversation. But still, suppose I'm working in Mumbai and most of as Swati and we had the conversation much fairly, but 600 plus metric tons are the waste. So the everyone are concerned कि how इसको कैसे manage करें और क्या 1, 2, 3 agendas ले ले. Yeah. So that's something. The questions was still
Yeah.
rolling in
I
the back
think
of my mind.
Bhagwan, so it will be up to us now to collectively pick further the brains of the experts and figure out these the answer to that question, because that is the magic question that we are trying to sort of answer in this one. Lena, you have your hand up. Lena, you'll have to unmute. Now we can hear you. We can hear you.
Oh, I have unmuted. You can't hear me? Okay. Thank you for all those information that is shared over here. I think it's going to be very helpful. My question to Dr. Sinha is that, like just now he mentioned about leaf litter, and we realized that in Nagpur we were really wanting to work on this aspect in colleges where there are huge campuses, and government institutions where the campuses are huge, where we wanted to start leaf composting. The question that I want to ask Dr. Sinha is that, what about sanitary napkin waste? Because in a city, in a small city like Nagpur, the waste that is generated is almost 11 metric tons, per day. And this is huge. And we all know that there is a tendency for people to burn the sanitary napkin waste. Now, there was this very stupid thing that came out where, I'm visiting the central jail for to do inspection and supervision. I go to different colleges and all. And I see that, there have been guidelines given under the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan sometime where they said that install these small incinerators. And so I am just trying to understand, because and there is no separate collection of sanitary napkin waste. It is all going in the dump yard. The sanitary napkin waste has been put under the dry waste category. So all the sanitary napkin waste is actually going in the domestic, and it's not going in the biomedical waste. So I am a little bit, concerned about this, because I know for sure that people burn it, people either, flush it in the toilet. So the sanitary napkin waste is a huge issue, actually, sir. If you could just give your insights on this.
Yeah, actually, I know a better expert for that. Is the person. So she's a faculty here. Maybe I can connect her to you later, the email. But what I know of this is that, when we break down in terms of actionable items, then we also have to consider, from my limited understanding, how people, what are the social taboos? Like if we talk about sanitary napkin, as you rightly already mentioned, there are so many sections in the society who'd go like, I don't want to touch it, I don't want to have it, like put it under the carpet, as you said, just be in denial or like not really be proactive. Leaf litter, on the other hand, was something that was an easy thing to segregate. You see it is very visible, when it will fall down, and then it's so in terms of, I would say, practicalities involved of disposing it. That's what I meant by we could target the ones that are much easier to do. But you're absolutely correct, Bertley. What we have done is we have done controlled burns of sanitary napkins under a variety of combustion conditions that would be representative of how people burn it in a landfill or in a small incinerator or so on. And yeah, it's one of the worst things that you can have piling up in the environment, like other things. So we can give you the data on that. As for what, I think I'm also probably not the right gender to have a correct appreciation of advising how we could go about handling this particular type of waste. So that's where I thought it would be better I'd connect you to somebody who has actually done the surveys, spoken to people. And we are in an educational campus, so like we have 2,000 students. As recently the Dean Acad, I didn't want to be the Dean students because there's in the hostels we have teenagers, young adults, and so this is actually a very real problem. But on the other hand, now after listening to you, it occurs to me that if somebody else was asking about how do we tell policymakers what to go for, this could be a very tangible, easy to target, because this particular part of the population is in educational institutions, in residential hostels, right? IITs, IISERs, whatever, and central universities you were mentioning, or other universities. So they already have some basic understanding. And if we could sort of put an evidence-based system that actually works and mitigates it, I don't think it will be possible to completely cut it out. But if, bring it down to the lowest possible, then that could be a very tangible thing to work on. So I think that's all I can say right now.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Doctor.
I have to go now, actually.
Yes.
Don't mind.
Thank you so
It's been
much.
a pleasure. I
for
learned a
attending.
lot from all of you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Good to see
And
you
thank
again.
you, Divya, as well. I think all the others have dropped off, but thank you so much. We'll keep in touch. Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. Bye.